Hello, friends, family, and anyone else on the internet who happens to see this. My name is Michael with Rock Hard Polishing, and today I have part 1 of 2 of opening my geodes and agate that I got from Christmas, which my in-laws were kind enough to get me. So part 1 is going to be me cutting the huge agate that I actually didn't realize they'd gotten me until later in the day on Christmas because, believe it or not, I didn't want to take a bunch of rocks out on their living room carpet, so I didn't dig to the bottom of the box where the largest rock was. I could tell from the exterior of the rock that it was going to be a really pretty piece, but I could also tell that it was going to be an issue because of how large it is. I forgot to show the camera beforehand how big it actually was, but it is easily about the length of my forearm, and it couldn't actually fit into my normal clip that I use. So since this is such a long video, I will be letting it go silent for a little while every once in a while because I simply don't have enough things to talk about to fill 20 minutes of time, so I will be punching in and out every once in a while. So what I ended up having to do for this one is I actually use 2 of my larger rocks that I would normally use to brace my clip to instead hold it somewhat in place so it wouldn't go flying, at least to the left, which was the way it seemed to be dragging. So I was able to hold it down well enough to actually use my saw on it, which I was definitely going to need to because this thing is solid all the way through. So here I'm just getting started on the smaller end of the rock. I decided it came to a little bit more of a point on this edge, so I figured I would get started on this side. You can see me just keep going up and down. Every once in a while, I take the blade away from the rock and just let it spin off of it for a second. That's because something like this is spinning so fast it can actually air cool itself if you take it off for a little while. That's why these blades that I use are wet and dry run, because I don't always have a way to just be pouring water on it constantly to use a only wet wheel. So I use a dry and wet and try and keep it as wet as I can. But every once in a while you'll see me turn it off for a moment or pull it back off the rock and let it run by itself so that it can cool down and the diamonds on the blade aren't getting so hot that they actually fall off and start making the saw useless. So here is where I start to have a little trouble with the size of the agate itself. My larger rocks weren't quite holding it too well, so I fumble with it for a good little while. But sometimes you just need a little trial and error to find something that works for you. So now I'm flipping it over to do the underside of it, and what's so difficult with a rock of this size and the way that I'm doing it is being that it's an angle grinder, it's not set in one specific position, so I have to try and account for my own human inaccuracies, which in the end of this one didn't end up being the best, but nothing sanding and polishing can't fix. So it was about now that I started to realize that due to human error, it was actually off. So I was coming in sort of diagonally to the first cut that I had made. And again, that's what's so hard about using something freehand like I do, as opposed to a wet tile saw or a proper lapidary saw, is that is stuck in one place. You just push the rock through and it'll handle it. Where with my angle grinder, obviously I have to flip it a few different times, find the best way for it to be held, and unfortunately that comes at the cost of the the cut itself, because on this one I ended up with a decent little bit of extra material in the middle, but nothing sanding can't solve. So now I'm flipping the rock around to actually try and connect the two cuts that I made. Like I said, I was coming in at a diagonal, so I had to actually flip it around and sort of carve out the top myself to make it attach. And that's where a good knowledge of geodes actually helps, because I know as long as I can connect the two cuts somewhat, I don't have to cut all the way through. I can actually just take my chisel and break it through the middle. And then I will have, albeit sloppy pieces in the middle, pieces that I can work with and get them separated to put them on a belt sander or something of that kind. So you can tell from how deep in my blade is that I am getting towards the end of cutting this, and again, something of this size and only having a 4.5-inch blade, I can't really get down all the way into it, so I am going to have to finish it off with my hammer and chisel, which isn't the worst thing, but doesn't leave a perfectly smooth cut to make it super easy for polishing. So now I'm grabbing the hammer and chisel, and with how deep in I was able to actually get to cut the rock, it doesn't take much more than just one foul slap, and then it's open. And even in its rough form, you can tell it's very glassy, very pretty on the inside. And once I finally get some water over it, you can see it a lot better. That red spot on the closer one really shines up when you put some water on it. I wanted to take my gloves off because they aren't very expensive gloves, so they do soak up the water very easily. And you can also see all that silica dust on my pants that goes right into the laundry after doing these videos. But I'm using my phone's flashlight to try and show the glassy interior, and you can see some of those agate bands in there. It's all a very nice soft blue. The one side looks like it has a little bit more, but that could just be due to how it was cut and the fact that they aren't polished. But I really love the way that this rock turned out. This is definitely a prize piece that I'm going to get polished up as soon as I can. But that is the end of part 1. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, and share it with anyone you know who might also be interested in a video like this. Thank you.